Lesson 1. Organization of the nervous system. Good evening. I am so glad you have decided to set aside the noise of the day and join me here in this quiet space of learning. Tonight, we are embarking on a journey. It is a voyage not across oceans or into the stars, but inward into the most complex, intricate, and beautiful structure in the known universe, the human nervous system. Before we can understand the sparks of thought or the chemistry of dreams, we must first understand the landscape itself. Imagine, for a moment, that we are explorers standing at the edge of a vast, unmapped continent. We do not yet need to know the name of every tree or the path of every river. Our first task is simply to unfurl the map. We want to see the boundaries. We want to understand the major territories and how they connect to one another. This lesson is about organization. It is about the grand architecture of you. We are going to look at the nervous system not as a cold biological machine, but as a masterfully designed kingdom, a place of central command and distant outposts, of incoming messengers and outgoing orders. It is a system of perfect communication that has been refining itself for millions of years. So, get comfortable. Adjust your pillows if you need to. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. You simply need to listen and let the logic of your own body reveal itself to you. We are going to build this map together, piece by piece, starting from the center and moving out to the very edges of your existence. To truly understand how your body communicates with itself, we must divide this vast nervous system into two primary territories. In anatomy, we are always looking for structure, for the way things are grouped, and the first, most fundamental division is between the center and the periphery. Let us begin with the center. We call this the central nervous system, or often simply the CNS. I want you to picture a fortress, a great, protected citadel sitting at the very heart of the kingdom. This citadel is the command center. It is where the decisions are made, where the records are kept, and where the essence of the self resides. The central nervous system consists of only two structures, yet they are the most protected organs in your entire body. First, there is the brain, encased safely within the hard, bony vault of the cranium. And second, connected seamlessly to the base of the brain, is the spinal cord, which runs down the length of your back, shielded by the armor of your vertebrae. That is the CNS. The brain and the spinal cord. It is the integration center. It is the place where information comes to be sorted, understood, and acted upon. Nothing enters the conscious mind without passing through the gates of the central nervous system. It is the seat of intellect, of memory, and of emotion. But a king in a castle cannot rule a kingdom if he cannot speak to his subjects. A command center is useless if it is isolated from the world. This brings us to the second great territory, the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. If the CNS is the castle, the peripheral nervous system represents the roads, the highways, and the messengers that travel them. The PNS is composed of all the nervous tissue outside of the CNS. These are the nerves. You can visualize them as long, delicate cables extending out from the brain and spinal cord, branching and rebranching like the roots of a great tree, reaching into every corner of your body. These nerves go everywhere. They weave through your muscles, they wrap around your bones, they thread into the deepest parts of your organs, and they end in the very tips of your fingers and toes. They are the communication lines. Without the peripheral nervous system, the brain would be trapped in silence and darkness. It is the PNS that links the central command to the reality of the outside world. Take a moment to let that idea find its place. You are a duality of structure. You are the central command, the brain and spine, and you are the peripheral network, the vast web of nerves connecting everything else. The center decides. the periphery connects. It is a partnership of absolute necessity. Now that we have our map drawn with these two broad strokes, the central and the peripheral, we must look closer at the roads themselves. The peripheral nervous system is not just a jumble of random wires. It is highly organized, structured by the direction in which the traffic flows. Imagine standing on a highway. You see cars moving in two directions. Some are heading toward the city, and some are leaving the city. The nervous system works exactly the same way. We classify the nerves based on which way the information is traveling. First, we have the sensory division. In medical language, we call this the afferent division. A helpful way to remember this is that afferent starts with the letter A, just like the word arriving. These are the messengers that bring news from the kingdom back to the castle. They carry information toward the central nervous system. Every sensation you have ever felt travels on this road. When you feel the coolness of the pillow against your cheek, that is the afferent division at work. It picks up the data from your skin temperature, texture, pressure, and races it up the nerves, into the spine, and finally to the brain. The afferent division is the input line. It keeps the brain informed about what is happening both outside the body and inside the body. It tells the brain that the stomach is full, that the light is bright, or that the music is soothing. On the other side of the highway, we have the motor division. We call this the efferent division. You can remember this because efferent starts with E, like the word exit. These are the messengers leaving the castle, carrying orders away from the central nervous system out to the body. This is the output line. When the brain decides to do something, it uses the efferent division to make it happen. If you decide to close your eyes, the command starts in the brain, travels down the spinal cord, and exits through the motor nerves to the muscles of your eyelids. The motor division causes effects. It causes action. Let's pause here for a second. If your mind is still following along, try visualizing this traffic. A constant stream of afferent messengers arriving with news, and a constant stream of efferent messengers leaving with orders. It is a continuous loop of listening and responding. But we can add one final layer of detail to this map, and it is a fascinating one. Within the motor division, the output side, we have two distinct departments. We have the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is the part of you that you control. It connects the CNS to your skeletal muscles. This is the system of your will. When you choose to shift your position in bed, or when you choose to speak, or walk, or write, you are using the somatic system. It is voluntary. It waits for your command. But there is a second department, one that operates below the surface of your awareness. This is the autonomic nervous system. As the name suggests, it is automatic. It is the master of the involuntary. It connects the CNS to your smooth muscles, your cardiac muscle, and your glands. You do not have to tell your heart to beat. You do not have to command your stomach to digest your dinner. You do not have to remind your lungs to breathe while you sleep. The autonomic nervous system handles all of this for you. It is the silent steward of your survival, managing the complex chemistry of life without ever bothering your conscious mind with the details. Even within this automatic system, there is a balance. We often speak of the sympathetic division, which prepares you for action, the famous fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic division, which calms you down for rest and digest. These two forces work in a gentle tug of war, constantly fine-tuning your internal state to match the world around you. So, look at how complex the map has become, yet how logical it remains. We have the central nervous system, the ruler. Within that network, we have the sensory roads bringing information in and the motor roads carrying orders out. And within those orders, we have the voluntary actions you choose and the involuntary actions that keep you alive. Why does this matter? Why do we spend this time mapping the territories? Because understanding this structure is understanding yourself. It changes the way you perceive your own experience of being alive. Consider your current state, right now, as you listen to my voice. This very moment is a symphony of the organization we just discussed. Your afferent sensory nerves are currently sensing the weight of the blanket and the temperature of the room, sending that data to your brain so you know you are safe and warm. Your central nervous system, your brain, is processing the sound of these words, turning sound waves into meaning, storing these concepts into your memory. Meanwhile, your autonomic nervous system has taken over the heavy lifting. Since you are relaxing, your parasympathetic division is active. It is slowing your heart rate down. It is softening your breathing. It is telling your muscles that there is no tiger to fight, no mountain to climb, and that it is safe to let go. There is a profound comfort in realizing that you are not just a single entity, but a vast, collaborative community of cells. You do not have to do it all alone. You can surrender to sleep, because the organization of your nervous system is designed to hold you. The autonomic guards the gate, while the somatic sleeps. The central processing slows down, allowing the peripheral world to fade away. It is a design of exquisite reliability. The castle is secure, the roads are clear, the messengers know their paths. You can trust this system. It has been working since the moment you were born, and it will continue to work rhythmically and faithfully all through the night. Take a deep breath now, and just let that map settle in your mind's eye. See the great central column of the spine, the branching trees of the nerves, the flow of information coming in and going out. It is a complete picture, but a map is only paper and ink. A territory is made of more than just boundaries. It is made of substance. What are these structures actually built from? If we were to take a magnifying glass and zoom in on one of those nerves, or look closely at the tissue of the brain, what would we find? We would find the true citizens of this kingdom. We would find the cells. Having now grasped the structure, we are perfectly prepared to appreciate the materials. So, let's hold that thought here, a complete piece of the puzzle. Our next lesson will hand us the adjacent piece. When we return, we will leave the macroscopic world behind and descend into the microscopic. We will meet the neuron, the tiny spark plug of life that makes it all possible. For now, rest in the knowledge that the system is whole and you are well. Lesson 2. Histology of nervous tissue, neurons and neuroglia. Welcome back. I am glad you are still here with me. In our last session, we stood high above the landscape. We drew the map of the nervous system, tracing the great boundaries between the central fortress of the brain and the sprawling network of the peripheral nerves. We looked at the kingdom as a whole. Tonight, we are going to change our perspective entirely. We are going to descend from that high altitude. We are going to zoom in, closer and closer still. We will pass through the skin, through the protective layers of tissue, until the visible structures vanish from sight. We are entering the microscopic world. This is often the moment where true understanding begins. You see, a map can tell you where the cities are, but it cannot tell you what the people are like. To understand the nervous system, we must meet its citizens. We must look at the specific cells that make thought, sensation, and movement possible. It is a world of incredible diversity and specialization. In this microscopic landscape, there are billions of tiny entities living their lives, performing their specific tasks with silent dedication. Tonight, we are going to study the two families of cells that populate your nervous system, the famous communicative neurons, and their silent, supportive partners, the neuroglia. So, settle in. Let the tension in your jaw release. Let your eyes grow heavy. We are about to observe the very building blocks of your mind. There is a beautiful order here, a logic that governs the shape and function of every single cell. Let us discover it together. We begin with the star of the show, the neuron. When you think of the nervous system, this is likely the cell you picture. The neuron is the specialized unit of communication. It is the wire, the messenger, and the computer chip, all in one. It is designed for one primary purpose: to transmit information via electrical and chemical signals. I want you to visualize a neuron. The classic image of a neuron looks remarkably like a tree. This is not a coincidence. Nature often repeats its most effective shapes. At the center of this tree is the cell body, or the soma. This is the heart of the cell. It contains the nucleus, the dark, central library where the DNA is kept. It contains the mitochondria, the power plants that generate the energy the cell needs to survive. The soma is the metabolic center. It is where the cell lives and breathes. Extending out from this cell body are many short, branching structures. These look like the roots of our tree, or perhaps the spindly branches of a winter bush. These are called dendrites. The word comes from the Greek dendron, meaning tree. The dendrites are the listeners. They reach out into the surrounding space, searching for connections. Their job is to receive input. They are covered in tiny receptors, waiting to catch chemical messages sent by other neurons. When a dendrite catches a signal, it channels that information inward, down toward the cell body. Think of them as antennas, gathering news from the world and funneling it to the center. Then, extending from the other side of the cell body, there is a single, long tail. This is the trunk of our tree. It is called the axon. While the dendrites bring information in, the axon carries information out. It is the transmission line. Some axons are microscopic, bridging a tiny gap in the brain. Others are incredibly long. Think of the axon that runs from the base of your spine all the way down to your big toe. That is a single cell stretching over a meter in length. At the very end of the axon, the structure branches out again into fine tips called axon terminals. These are the delivery drivers. When the electrical signal reaches these terminals, they release the chemical packages that will bridge the gap to the next cell. So, picture the flow of information. It is a one-way street. The signal is caught by the dendrites, it passes through the soma, it travels down the long axon, and it is delivered by the terminals. It is a perfect, directional stream. But here is a detail that adds a layer of nuance. The connection between the cell body and the axon is a cone-shaped region called the axon hillock. I like to think of this as the decision point. You see, the dendrites might be receiving hundreds of conflicting whispers, some saying fire, some saying wait. All these signals collect at the axon hillock. If the signal is strong enough, the hillock pulls the trigger, and the message fires down the axon. If the signal is too weak, it fades away. It is the gatekeeper of your thoughts. Now, if the story ended there, we would have a functional system, but a fragile one. A neuron is a high-performance machine. It consumes a massive amount of energy. It is so busy transmitting signals that it cannot always take care of itself. It is like a race car driver. The driver cannot change their own tires or refuel their own tank while driving at 200 miles per hour. They need a pit crew. This brings us to the second family of cells, the unsung heroes of the nervous system, the neuroglia. The word neuroglia literally means nerve glue. For a long time, scientists thought these cells were just packing material, mere stuffing to keep the neurons from falling apart. But we now know they are so much more. They are the caretakers, the doctors, the defenders, and the structural engineers of the brain. In fact, they outnumber neurons by a significant margin. Let us meet a few members of this pit crew, because they are fascinating in their own right. First, within the central nervous system, we have the astrocytes. These are star-shaped cells that act as the living bridge between the neurons and your blood supply. They wrap their tiny feet around the capillaries and the neurons, bracing them. They filter nutrients from the blood and feed the neurons. They also clean up the chemical waste that neurons leave behind. They are the ultimate housekeepers. Then there are the microglia. These are small, spider-like cells with a very serious job. They are the immune defense. They wander through the brain, looking for debris, dead cells, or invading bacteria. When they find something that shouldn't be there, they consume it. Since your regular white blood cells cannot easily enter the brain, the microglia are the private security force of the central nervous system. And then there are the ependymal cells. These line the hollow cavities of the brain. They have tiny beating hairs, or cilia, which circulate the fluid that cushions the brain. They are the circulation managers, ensuring the environment remains fresh and protective. But perhaps the most critical task of the neuroglia is insulation. Imagine a copper wire carrying electricity. If you leave it bare, the electricity leaks out, or it short circuits against other wires. To make it efficient, you wrap it in rubber. Your body does the exact same thing. It wraps the axons of your neurons in a fatty, white substance called myelin. This process is handled by two specific types of glial cells. In the central nervous system, the oligodendrocytes do this work. A single oligodendrocyte reaches out with multiple arms and wraps them around several nearby axons, holding them together like a cluster of cables. In the peripheral nervous system, in your arms and legs, this job falls to the Schwann cell. The Schwann cell is unique. It doesn't just reach out, it wraps its entire body around the axon. Imagine taking a tube of toothpaste and rolling it between your hands. The Schwann cell flattens itself and winds around the axon, layer upon layer, round and round, until it forms a thick, protective coating. This coating, the myelin sheath, is what makes the white matter of your brain white. It is fat, and it serves a miraculous function. It forces the electrical signal to jump. Instead of crawling slowly down the entire length of the axon, the signal leaps from one gap in the insulation to the next. These gaps have a beautiful name, the nodes of Ranvier. Because of myelin, the signal travels hundreds of times faster. It transforms a slow stroll into a lightning-fast sprint. This is why you can stub your toe and feel the pain instantly. It is why you can think a thought as quickly as you can perceive the world. It is the myelin that grants us the speed of consciousness. So, why does this histology matter to you, right now, as you drift towards sleep? It matters because it explains the physical reality of who you are. We often think of our minds as abstract clouds of thought, but they are grounded in this cellular machinery. When we talk about muscle memory or learning, we are talking about these cells. When you practice a skill like playing the piano, or even learning to relax your body, you are physically changing the structure of these cells. Your neurons sprout new dendrites to make better connections. Your glial cells add more myelin to the circuits you use most often, insulating them to make them faster and more efficient. This is a concept called plasticity. Your brain is not a static block of stone. It is a living, shifting forest. Every time you have a thought, you are walking a path through that forest. The more you walk it, the clearer the path becomes. Consider the sensation of the sheets against your skin right now. That is a specific type of neuron, likely a unipolar sensory neuron, detecting pressure. Its dendrites are in your skin. Its axon runs all the way to your spine, and the Schwann cells are wrapped tight around it, ensuring that the feeling of comfort reaches your brain without delay. There is a deep reassurance in knowing that you are built with such care. You have the neurons, the dazzling performers carrying the sparks of your life, and you have the neuroglia, the billions of silent supporters, feeding, cleaning, protecting, and holding you together. You are a self-sustaining ecosystem. Even now, As you rest, your microglia are sweeping for dust. Your astrocytes are fueling the neurons for tomorrow. Your ependymal cells are gently circulating the fluid in your brain. The city inside you never sleeps, so that you can. Take a moment to let that microscopic world fade from your focus. Imagine zooming back out, leaving the tiny cell bodies and the winding axons behind. We have now seen the map in Lesson 1, and tonight we have held the building blocks in our hands. We know the structure of the wire, the dendrite, the soma, the axon. We know the insulation of the myelin. We have the hardware completely assembled. But a wire, no matter how perfectly insulated, is useless without a current. A computer chip is just sand and metal until you plug it in. The question that remains is the most mysterious one of all. Where does the spark come from? How does a bag of salty water and protein generate electricity? This is the magic of physiology. It is not enough to simply exist. The cell must be alive with energy. So, let your mind rest on the image of that silent, waiting neuron. It is perfect. It is ready. In our next lesson, we will provide the spark. We will explore the chemistry of the membrane potential. We will learn how your body harnesses the power of ions to create the lightning of the soul. For now, trust in the billions of cells that are working for you this very moment. Let them carry you into the dark. Lesson 3. Membrane potential and the resting state. Welcome back. I hope you are finding a comfortable space for your mind to rest. We have been traveling together for some time now, building this complex machine piece by piece. In our first lesson, we drew the map, separating the central castle from the outlying roads. In our second lesson, we zoomed in to hold the building blocks in our hands, the branching neurons and their supportive glia. We have the geography and we have the architecture. The wires are laid, the insulation is wrapped, the connections are made. But if you look at the system as we have built it so far, it is silent. It is a beautiful, intricate statue, cold and still. A wire is nothing without a current. A machine is nothing without power. Tonight, we change that. Tonight, we are going to explore the source of the spark. We are going to answer the fundamental question of how a living, biological cell, which is essentially a bag of water and protein, can generate electricity. It is a concept that feels almost like magic, but it is actually the most elegant chemistry imaginable. We are going to study the resting membrane potential. Do not let the technical name intimidate you. Potential simply means possibility. It is the energy waiting to be used. Think of an archer standing in a field. When they pull the bowstring back, the arrow does not move. The scene is perfectly still, but there is immense energy stored in the tension of that bent wood. The bow is at rest, but it is powerful. That is your nervous system. Even when you are sleeping, even when you are completely still, your billions of neurons are like drawn bows, holding a precise chemical tension, ready to fly at a moment's notice. Let us look closely at how your body creates this tension. To understand electricity in the body, we have to unlearn what we know about electricity in a wall socket. In your house, electricity is the flow of electrons through a copper wire. But in your body, electricity is the flow of ions. An ion is simply an atom that carries an electrical charge. It has either lost an electron to become positive or gained one to become negative. The entire nervous system runs on the movement of these charged particles floating in water. Imagine a single neuron. Picture it floating in the fluid of your body. To create a battery, which is essentially what a neuron is, you need to separate charges. You need a positive side and a negative side. If you mix everything together, the energy dissipates. You need a barrier to keep them apart. That barrier is the cell membrane. The membrane of a neuron is a fascinating structure. It is a phospholipid bilayer. Picture a wall made of two layers of fat. Fat and water do not mix, so this fatty wall creates a perfect seal, separating the fluid inside the cell, the intracellular fluid, from the fluid outside the cell, the extracellular fluid. Now, here is the secret recipe. The fluid outside the cell is chemically very different from the fluid inside. Nature has arranged the ions in a specific way. Outside the cell, surrounding the neuron like a vast ocean, we have a high concentration of sodium ions. We denote sodium as Na+. It carries a positive charge. You can think of the neuron as a ship floating in a salty sea. The salt is the sodium. Inside the cell, within the ship, the environment is different. Here, we have a high concentration of potassium ions. We denote potassium as K+. Potassium also carries a positive charge, which can be confusing at first, but stay with me. There is a simple mnemonic, or memory aid, that students have used for decades. The salty banana. A banana is rich in potassium. So, think of the neuron as a banana, full of potassium, floating in a salty ocean full of sodium. But there is one more ingredient inside the cell. Floating alongside the potassium are large, negatively charged proteins, anions. These proteins are too big to leave the cell. They are trapped inside, and because they are negative, they pull the electrical balance of the cell's interior down. So, let us look at the scoreboard. Outside, we have a lot of positive sodium. Inside, we have positive potassium, but we also have those heavy, negative proteins. The result is a difference in charge. The inside of the neuron is negatively charged compared to the outside. This difference is measurable. If you could take a tiny voltmeter, like an electrician uses, and place one probe inside the neuron and one outside, you would read a voltage of approximately -70 millivolts. That number, -70, is the resting membrane potential. It is the tension on the bowstring. The cell is negative on the inside, positive on the outside. We call this state polarized. Now, you might be thinking, if nature loves balance, why don't the ions just rush in and neutralize everything? That is the brilliant struggle of life. The universe wants to reach equilibrium. The sodium desperately wants to get inside the cell. It is drawn by two forces. First, the concentration gradient. Particles want to move from where they are crowded to where they are empty. Since there is so much sodium outside, it wants to rush in. Second, the electrical gradient. Opposites attract. Since the inside of the cell is negative, the positive sodium is magnetically pulled toward it. So, sodium is banging on the gates, trying to get in. But the fatty membrane is a strict gatekeeper. It says, no. Under normal resting conditions, the membrane is largely impermeable to sodium. It keeps the ocean out. However, the membrane is not a solid wall. It has tiny pores, or tunnels, called leak channels. And this is where the story gets nuanced. The membrane has many leak channels for potassium, but very few for sodium. This means that the potassium inside the cell can gently leak out. As positive potassium leaves the cell, it takes its positive charge with it, making the inside even more negative. It is a slow, steady drift. But wait. If potassium keeps leaking out, and a tiny bit of sodium manages to sneak in, eventually the battery would die, wouldn't it? The gradients would fade away. The bowstring would go slack. This is where the hero of our story enters. It is a protein machine embedded in the wall of the cell, and it works tirelessly, day and night, to maintain the tension. It is called the sodium-potassium pump. This pump is a marvel of biological engineering. It works against the natural flow. It grabs 3 sodium ions that have snuck inside the cell and forces them out. At the same time, It grabs 2 potassium ions from the outside and drags them back in. 3 sodiums out, 2 potassiums in. Picture a boat with a small leak. The water is trying to get in. The pump is the sailor with a bucket, constantly bailing the water out to keep the boat afloat. This process requires energy. In fact, a huge portion of the food you eat, the calories you consume, goes purely to fueling these pumps. Even when you are lying perfectly still, your brain is burning energy just to keep these pumps running, just to keep the sodium out and the potassium in. 3 out, 2 in, over and over again, because it pumps out more positive charges, 3, than it brings in 2, the pump itself helps keep the inside negative. It maintains that negative 70 millivolts. It ensures the bow remains drawn. Why go to all this trouble? Why does your body spend so much energy creating this electrical tension? Think about a battery in a flashlight. If the battery is dead, if there is no charge difference, you can flip the switch all you want, but there will be no light. The separation of charge is what allows for the flow of power. Your neurons keep themselves at negative 70 millivolts so that they are ready to fire instantly. If they were at equilibrium, if the inside and outside were the same, you couldn't think. You couldn't feel pain to pull your hand away from a fire. You couldn't hear the sound of a loved one's voice. This unstable state, this polarization, is the prerequisite for sensitivity. The neuron is sitting on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the slightest push to send a signal crashing down the line. It is a state of excitability. There is a philosophical beauty here. Life, at its cellular level, is a resistance to equilibrium. Equilibrium is death. If your cells reached perfect balance with their surroundings, you would cease to be. By working constantly to stay distinct, to stay negative on the inside and positive on the outside, your neurons buy you the ability to be alive. And consider the salty banana again. It connects you to the history of life on Earth. We evolved from organisms that lived in the ocean. The ocean is salty, rich in sodium. Our cells bathed in that ancient sea. Today, millions of years later, we carry that ocean with us. The fluid surrounding your cells is chemically similar to seawater. You have internalized the environment of your ancestors, creating a private ocean for your cells to float in. So, let us rest in this state of potential. Visualize that vast field of neurons in your brain, billions of them. Every single one is a microscopic battery. Every single one has its pumps working rhythmically, 3 sodiums out, 2 potassiums in. Every single one is holding that charge of negative 70 millivolts. The tension is high. The bow is bent. The arrow is knocked against the string. The entire system is vibrating with the possibility of action, yet it remains perfectly still. It is a quiet power. It is the silence before the thunder. But what happens when the silence breaks? What happens when the gatekeeper finally opens the door and lets the ocean rush in? That event is the most important electrical phenomenon in the human body. It is the spark of thought itself. In our next lesson, we will let the arrow fly. We will watch what happens when the membrane potential collapses and the current begins to flow. We will witness the action potential. For now, simply breathe. Let your own pumps do their work in the background. You don't have to control them. You are charged, you are ready, and you can rest. Lesson 4. The action potential. Propagation of the nerve impulse. Welcome back to our study. It is good to have you here again. We are moving through this curriculum with the patience of a true scholar, taking the time to understand not just the what, but the how and the why. In our last session, we left the neuron in a state of suspended animation. Do you remember the image we created? We visualized the neuron as a battery or a drawn bow. We learned about the resting membrane potential, that precise electrical tension of negative 70 millivolts. We saw the sodium ions waiting outside like a vast ocean, and the potassium ions resting inside, with the pumps working tirelessly to keep them apart. The system is primed, the stage is set, but a drawn bow is useless unless you release the string. A battery is just a heavy object unless you flip the switch. Tonight, we are going to flip that switch. This lesson is about movement. It is about the event that defines the nervous system. Without this event, there is no thought, no movement, no sensation. It is the biological equivalent of lightning. In physiology, we call it the action potential. An action potential is a temporary reversal of that electrical charge we studied. It is a wave of electricity that travels down the axon of the neuron, carrying a message from one end of your body to the other. It is the language your brain speaks. So, I invite you to relax your body. Let your limbs feel heavy, as if gravity is gently pulling you deeper into the mattress. You don't need to move. In fact, your stillness is the perfect contrast to the incredible speed of the events we are about to describe. While you rest, your neurons are dancing. Let us watch the dance. We begin at the beginning, the trigger. The neuron is sitting there at negative 70 millivolts, resting. But the world is not quiet. The dendrites, those branching roots we discussed in Lesson 2, are constantly being tickled by signals from other neurons or from the environment. Maybe it is a signal of pressure from your skin, or a chemical signal from a neighbor. These little signals cause small changes in the membrane. They let a tiny bit of positive sodium leak in. If the signal is weak, the membrane potential might drift up slightly, perhaps from negative 70 to negative 65, and then fade back down. Nothing happens. The bow remains drawn. But if the stimulus is strong enough, or if many small signals arrive at the same time, the voltage rises to a critical point. This point is called the threshold. Usually, this is around negative 55 millivolts. I want you to remember that number, negative 55. It is the tipping point. It is the moment the rock rolls over the edge of the hill. The moment the inside of the cell reaches negative 55 millivolts, the rules of the game change instantly. This is because the neuron has special doors in its membrane called voltage-gated channels. They are like electronic locks that only open at a specific voltage. And negative 55 is the key code. Snap. The gates fly open. Specifically, the sodium gates open first. Remember the ocean of sodium waiting outside? Remember how badly it wanted to get in? Now, the doors are wide open. Sodium ions rush into the cell in a massive, explosive wave. They flood the interior. Because sodium is positive, this influx causes the electrical charge inside the cell to shoot upward. It goes from negative 55, past zero, all the way up to plus 30 millivolts. The polarity has completely flipped. The inside is now positive compared to the outside. We call this phase depolarization. The poles have been reversed. It is a moment of chaos and energy, but it cannot last. The neuron cannot function if it stays positive forever. It must reset. So, almost as quickly as they opened, the sodium gates slam shut. The party is over. But the cell is still positively charged, filled with all that sodium. It needs to get back to negative. To do this, it opens a second set of doors, the potassium gates. Remember the salty banana? The potassium is inside. It is positive too. And now that the inside of the cell is crowded and positive, the potassium wants to leave. It is repelled by the positive charge. So, when its gates open, potassium rushes out of the cell, flowing into the extracellular fluid. As these positive ions leave, they take their positive charge with them. The voltage inside the cell drops rapidly. It falls from plus 30, back down past zero, back into the negatives. We call this phase repolarization. The cell is returning to its resting state. It is a rhythmic exchange. Sodium rushes in, up goes the voltage. Potassium rushes out, down goes the voltage. It is the heartbeat of the nervous system. Now, let us add a layer of sophistication to this. This rising and falling voltage is not just happening in one spot. If it did, the signal would go nowhere. It has to travel. This is the concept of propagation. I want you to imagine a line of dominoes. When you push the first domino, it falls, but as it falls, it hits the next one, causing that one to fall, and so on, down the line. The energy moves, even though the dominoes themselves stay in place. Or, perhaps a better analogy is the wave in a sports stadium. One section of the crowd stands up and throws their arms in the air, depolarization. As they sit back down, repolarization. The section next to them sees this and stands up. The wave travels around the stadium, but the people do not change seats. This is exactly what happens in the axon. When the first segment of the axon depolarizes, when the sodium rushes in, it changes the electrical environment for the next segment of the membrane. This triggers the voltage-gated channels in the next segment to hit their threshold of -55. They open, sodium rushes in there, and the action potential moves forward. It travels from the cell body down the axon toward the terminals. It is a self-perpetuating chain reaction. Once it starts, it cannot be stopped. This is known as the all or none principle. Think of firing a gun. You can squeeze the trigger gently, or you can squeeze it hard. But once the hammer drops, the bullet flies at the same speed every time. There is no such thing as a fast or slow action potential. There is no such thing as a half action potential. It either happens completely or it does not happen at all. This ensures that the signal arriving at your brain is clear and consistent. But there is one final, crucial detail in this process. When the potassium gates open to repolarize the cell, they are a bit sluggish. They are slow to close. As a result, too much potassium leaves the cell. The voltage drops below the resting level of -70, dipping down to perhaps -90 millivolts. We call this phase hyperpolarization. It is an overshoot. This is important because it creates a refractory period. For a brief moment, the neuron is too negative. It is far away from the -55 threshold. This means it is very difficult, or impossible, to fire another signal immediately. The neuron needs a millisecond of rest. This rest period serves a vital purpose. It ensures traffic only flows one way. Because the segment behind the wave is in its refractory period, the signal cannot turn around and go backward. It is forced to move forward toward the destination. It keeps your thoughts linear. It keeps your sensory signals moving toward the brain, not bouncing back to the skin. And finally, once the gates are all closed, our old friend from Lesson 3, the sodium-potassium pump, quietly goes back to work. It cleans up the mess. It puts the sodium back outside and brings the potassium back inside, restoring the chemical balance so the neuron is ready to fire again. It is easy to get lost in the ions and the voltages, so let us anchor this in reality. Why does this mechanism matter to your daily life? First, consider the speed. While we describe this in slow motion, in reality, this entire cycle depolarization, repolarization, reset happens in about 1 or 2 milliseconds. That is 1,000th of a second. Some neurons can fire hundreds of times per second. This speed is what allows you to play a video game, or catch a falling glass, or finish a sentence. It is faster than conscious thought. Furthermore, understanding this channel mechanism explains how modern medicine can manage pain. Have you ever been to the dentist and received an injection of Novocaine or lidocaine? These drugs are local anesthetics. Do you know how they work? They are molecular corks. They physically plug the voltage-gated sodium channels. Think about that. If the sodium channel is blocked, sodium cannot rush in. If sodium cannot rush in, the threshold cannot be broken. No depolarization occurs. No action potential is generated. The dentist can drill, but the nerve cannot send the message, pain, to your brain. The wire is cut, chemically. The signal dies before it starts. You are numb because the doors are locked. It is a testament to how mechanical we truly are. By simply blocking a tiny protein pore, we can silence the most intense sensations. So, take a moment to marvel at that. Billions of times a day, this wave is rushing through you. Sodium in, potassium out. The wave traveling down the axon like a flame traveling down a fuse. The signal races from the spinal cord, down the leg, all the way to the tip of the toe, or from the eye, through the optic nerve, into the depths of the brain. It is fast, efficient, and unstoppable. But every fuse has an end. Every road has a terminus. Eventually, the electrical wave reaches the end of the axon. It arrives at the axon terminal, and there, it faces a problem. There is a gap. The neuron does not touch the next cell in the line. There is a physical space, a chasm, separating them. Electricity cannot jump through empty space without a medium. So, how does the message cross the void? How does the spark jump from one person to the next? The answer is that it must change its nature. It must transform from electricity into something else entirely. This is a good place to rest your thoughts for a moment before we continue. The signal has arrived at the cliff's edge. In our next lesson, we will build the bridge. We will explore the synapse and the magical chemicals that float across it. For now, let the waves of your own mind slow down. The storm of ions is under control. Lesson 5. Synaptic transmission and neurotransmitters. Welcome back. I am glad you are still here, drifting along this river of knowledge with me. We are making wonderful progress. We have built the map, we have constructed the cell, and in our last lesson, we witnessed the lightning. We watched the action potential, that wave of electrical energy race down the axon. We saw the dominoes falling, one after another, as sodium and potassium danced across the membrane. We followed that signal all the way from the cell body down the long, winding cable of the axon until we reached the very end of the line. And now we face a problem, or rather a challenge of design. You see, the nervous system is not a single, continuous wire. If it were, it would be simple, but it would also be rigid. You could never learn, never change, never adapt. Instead, the nervous system is made of billions of separate, individual cells. And like islands in an archipelago, they do not touch. Between the axon terminal of one neuron and the dendrite of the next, there is a gap, a physical space, a chasm. In the microscopic world, this gap is vast. It is called the synapse. The word comes from the Greek synapsis, meaning to clasp or to join. It is the meeting place. But here is the dilemma. Electricity cannot jump through empty space. The spark we created in the last lesson cannot simply fly across the gap like a stunt car jumping a canyon. If the signal reaches the end of the axon and stops, the thought dies. The movement fails. The sensation vanishes. So, how do we bridge the void? How does the command "move your hand" get from the nerve to the muscle if they aren't physically connected? Tonight, we find out. Tonight, we witness a transformation. We will see the signal change its nature entirely, shifting from the harsh, fast crackle of electricity to the slow, fluid language of chemistry. We are going to watch the boats cross the river. So, let your mind become quiet. Imagine standing on the bank of a dark, silent stream. The message is coming. Let us see how it gets across. Let us set the scene. We are at the axon terminal. This is the end of the road for the electrical signal. We call this the presynaptic neuron because it comes before the synapse. It is the sender. On the other side of the gap, waiting patiently, is the postsynaptic neuron. It could be another nerve cell, or it could be a muscle fiber, or a gland. It is the receiver, and in between them lies the synaptic cleft. It is a tiny, fluid-filled space, only about 20 to 40 nanometers wide. It is filled with interstitial fluid. To an electron, this is an uncrossable ocean. Now, picture the action potential arriving at the terminal. It has traveled meters in milliseconds, rushing down the axon, but when it hits the end, it runs out of road. The sodium channels we discussed last time are no longer the most important players. As the electrical wave hits the terminal, it triggers a new set of doors to open. These are the voltage-gated calcium channels. Calcium is the key. You might think of calcium as building strong bones, which is true. But in the nervous system, calcium is a signal. It is a call to action. When these gates open, calcium ions from the outside fluid rush into the axon terminal. Inside the terminal, waiting like cargo ships in a harbor, are tiny bubbles called synaptic vesicles. These vesicles are filled with thousands of molecules. These molecules are the neurotransmitters. They are the chemical messengers. When the calcium rushes in, it acts like a command. It tells these vesicles to move. They drift toward the very edge of the neuron's membrane. They dock, and then, in a beautiful process called exocytosis, the vesicles fuse with the outer membrane of the cell. Imagine a bubble rising to the surface of a pond and popping. When the vesicle fuses, it bursts open, spilling its contents into the synaptic cleft. Suddenly, the gap is no longer empty. It is flooded with thousands of neurotransmitter molecules. They are released into the river. They do not swim. They diffuse. They drift across the fluid, pushed by the randomness of thermal energy, moving from the side of high concentration to the side of low concentration. It is a short journey, but a critical one. They float across the cleft and land on the surface of the postsynaptic neuron. On this far shore, there are special proteins waiting. These are the receptors. You can think of them as locks. The neurotransmitter molecules are the keys. The neurotransmitter drifts down and slots perfectly into the receptor. Click, the key turns. When the key binds to the lock, the receptor changes shape. It opens a channel, and now ions can flow again. Depending on the type of channel, sodium might rush in, restarting the electrical signal in the new cell. So, do you see the elegance of the sequence? Electrical becomes chemical, crossing the gap, and then chemical becomes electrical again, starting the new signal. It is a translation of languages that happens billions of times every second. Now, we must add some nuance to this picture. Because if every signal simply said, fire, our brains would be in a constant state of seizure. We need control. We need the ability to say stop as well as go. This is determined by the type of key and the type of lock. Some neurotransmitters are excitatory. When they bind to the receptor, they open sodium channels. Sodium rushes in, the voltage rises toward the threshold, and the next neuron is more likely to fire an action potential. We call this an excitatory postsynaptic potential, or EPSP. It is a yes vote. But other neurotransmitters are inhibitory. This is a concept that is wonderful for sleep. When these messengers bind to the receptor, they do not open sodium channels. Instead, they might open channels for potassium to leave, or for chloride, which is negative, to enter. The result is that the inside of the receiving cell becomes more negative. It drops further away from the threshold, perhaps down to -80 or -90 millivolts. This is called hyperpolarization. We call this an inhibitory postsynaptic potential, or IPSP. It is a no vote. It tells the neuron, hush, be quiet, do not pass this message on. Your brain is constantly weighing these votes. A single neuron might have thousands of dendrites, receiving thousands of messages at once. Some say fire, some say don't fire. The neuron sums them all up, a process called summation, and decides whether or not to pull the trigger. It is a democratic process, happening in the microcosm of your mind. But we must also ask, what happens to the mess? We cannot leave the neurotransmitters floating in the gap forever. If we did, the key would stay in the lock, and the signal would never stop. Your muscles would stay contracted. Your thoughts would get stuck. The signal must be brief to be meaningful. So, the system has a cleanup crew. As soon as the message is delivered, the neurotransmitters are removed. Sometimes, they are broken down by enzymes, little molecular scissors that cut the chemical apart. For example, acetylcholine is chopped up by an enzyme called acetylcholinesterase. Other times, the sender takes the message back. This is called reuptake. The presynaptic neuron has vacuum pumps that suck the neurotransmitter back up, repackage it into vesicles, and save it for the next time. It is the ultimate recycling program. Let us ground this chemistry in your actual experience. These chemicals are not abstract. They are the distinct flavors of your life. Consider acetylcholine. This is the messenger of movement. Every time you twitch a toe or blink an eye, your neurons are releasing acetylcholine onto your muscles, telling them to contract. Without it, you would be paralyzed. Consider dopamine. This is the molecule of more. It is associated with reward, motivation, and focus. When you check off an item on a to-do list or eat a delicious piece of chocolate, that little ping of satisfaction is dopamine flooding a synapse in your limbic system. Consider serotonin. This is the regulator of mood and, crucially, the sleep-wake cycle. When serotonin levels are balanced, you feel stable and calm. And consider GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. This is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. It is the great quieter. It creates those IPSPs, telling neurons to slow down. When you take a deep breath and feel your anxiety lessen, GABA is being released. It is the brain's natural sedative. This knowledge also unlocks the mystery of modern medicine. Most drugs that affect the mind work right here, at the synapse. Antidepressants, like SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, work by blocking the vacuum pumps. They stop the reuptake of serotonin. This leaves more serotonin floating in the gap for a longer time, giving it more chances to bind to the receptors and improve mood. Caffeine works by blocking the receptors for adenosine, a chemical that makes you feel tired. It literally stands in the doorway and prevents the sleep signal from getting into the house. It is empowering to realize that the feelings you have, energy, calmness, joy, sleepiness, are the result of these tiny keys turning in their locks. It is a chemical symphony, and your body is the orchestra. Take a moment to let that idea find its place. Imagine the millions of synapses in your brain right now. The lights are dimming. The excitatory signals of the day, the noise, the stress, the planning are quieting down. The inhibitory signals, the gentle GABA, the soothing serotonin are rising. They are washing over your cortex like a tide, telling the neurons to rest. Hush, they say. The work is done. We have spent 5 lessons looking at the pieces. We have seen the map, the cells, the electricity, and now the chemistry. We have all the components of the machine, but a pile of parts is not a person. To understand who you are, we must assemble these billions of neurons into the massive, complex structures that form the human mind. So, let us hold that thought here, a complete piece of the puzzle. Our next lesson will hand us the adjacent piece. We are going to zoom out. We are going to look at the headquarters. When we return, we will begin our tour of the central nervous system. We will explore the wrinkly, grey landscape of the cerebrum, the seat of your consciousness. Lesson 6. The central nervous system, the brain and cerebrum. Welcome back. We have arrived at a pivotal moment in our journey. For the past 5 lessons, we have been operating in the hidden world. We have been sailors in a microscopic submarine, navigating the fluids between cells, watching the dance of ions, and observing the tiny chemical ships crossing the synaptic gap. We have studied the bricks and the mortar, but tonight we surface. Tonight we pull back to see the magnificent cathedral that these billions of bricks have built. We are now entering the study of the central nervous system. Specifically, we are turning our gaze to the crown jewel of human anatomy. It is an object that weighs only about 3 pounds, yet it contains the entire universe of your experience. It is the seat of your consciousness, the keeper of your memories, and the author of your dreams. We are going to explore the human brain because the brain is so complex, we cannot rush through it. We are going to take our time. Tonight, we will focus our attention on the largest, most visible, and most evolutionarily advanced part of the brain. The part that you likely picture when you close your eyes and imagine the organ. We are talking about the cerebrum. This is the thinking brain. It is the soft, grey landscape where you reside. It is the executive office where the decisions are made. So, I invite you to settle into your pillows. Let your head rest heavy, supported and safe. It is a poetic thing, is it not? To use your brain to study itself. To let the very neurons we are describing be the ones that listen and understand. Let us begin our tour of the mind. If you were to hold a model of the human brain in your hands, the first thing you would notice is its size. In humans, the cerebrum is massive. It sits on top of the brainstem like the cap of a giant mushroom, completely overshadowing the older structures underneath. It accounts for more than 80% of the brain's total mass. The structure is divided down the middle by a deep canyon called the longitudinal fissure. This divides the cerebrum into 2 distinct halves, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. You have likely heard of these. We often speak of people being left-brained or right-brained. While the reality is far more interconnected than pop culture suggests, there is truth to the division. Generally speaking, the left hemisphere handles logic, language, and mathematics, the orderly details of life. The right hemisphere is more concerned with spatial awareness, facial recognition, emotion, and creativity, the broad strokes of the picture. But these 2 halves are not strangers, they are constantly talking. Deep within that canyon that separates them, there is a thick band of white nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. It is a bridge. Millions of axons cross this bridge every second, ensuring that what the right hand does, the left hand understands. It unifies your perception of the world. Now, look at the surface of these hemispheres. This is the cerebral cortex. The word cortex means bark, like the bark of a tree. It is the outer layer, and in the brain, this is where the magic happens. The cortex is made of grey matter. Do you remember our lesson on neurons? Grey matter is essentially a dense collection of cell bodies and dendrites. It is the processing centers. Deep underneath, on the inside, is the white matter, which is made of the myelinated axons, the wires connecting the processors. So, when you look at the outside of the brain, you are looking at the computer chips, the decision makers. This thin layer of grey tissue, only a few millimeters thick, is the physical substrate of human intelligence. As we look closer at this landscape, the most striking feature is its texture. The brain is not smooth like a balloon, it is wrinkled. It looks like a walnut, or perhaps a folded cloth. These wrinkles have names. The raised ridges, the bumps are called gyri. The deep grooves, the valleys are called sulci. Why is the brain so wrinkled? It is a solution to a problem of geometry. Think of a large tablecloth. If you want to fit that tablecloth into a small box, you have to crumple it up. You have to fold it over and over again. The human cortex is vast. If you were to flatten it out, it would cover a surface area roughly the size of a large pizza or a small table. To fit this massive amount of processing power into your head, nature folded it. The folding triples the surface area. It allows us to pack billions more neurons into the same small space. Now, let us map the territory. We divide each hemisphere into 4 major regions, or lobes. These are named after the skull bones that protect them. We will walk through them, one by one, from the front to the back. First, resting right behind your forehead, is the frontal lobe. This is the largest lobe, and it is the most human part of the brain. It is the CEO. It is the time traveler. This is the part of you that can imagine the future. It handles planning, motivation, and logical consequences. It is also the home of your personality. When you decide to stay in bed to sleep rather than getting up to check your phone, that is your frontal lobe exercising executive control. It quiets the impulses. It is the wise parent in your head. At the very back edge of the frontal lobe sits a special strip called the precentral gyrus, or the primary motor cortex. This strip contains a map of your body. Specific points on this strip control specific muscles. The top controls your hips. The side controls your face. It is the keyboard that plays the instrument of your body. Moving backward, we cross a central dividing line and enter the parietal lobe. This is the sensory center. It sits at the top and sides of your head. If the frontal lobe is about action, the parietal lobe is about feeling. It contains the primary somatosensory cortex. This is where touch lives. When you feel the softness of your pillow, the warmth of the blanket, or a gentle breeze, that signal travels from your skin to the parietal lobe. But it does more than just feel. It integrates. It tells you where your body is in space. It is the reason you can close your eyes right now and still know exactly where your hands are resting. It creates your physical sense of self. Now, let us slide our hands down to the sides of the head, right above the ears. Here lies the temporal lobe. The name comes from the word temple, or time, perhaps because the hair here grays first. This is the center of hearing. The auditory cortex resides here. It takes the vibrations of air hitting your eardrum and translates them into music, or voices, or the sound of the wind. But the temporal lobe has a deeper secret. Tucked inside, it is the hippocampus, the archive of memory. The temporal lobe helps you recognize faces, understand language, and recall the past. It gives your life context. Finally, we travel to the very back of the head, to the occipital lobe. This is the smallest of the 4, but it has a massive job. It is the visual processing center. It is the projector screen of the mind. It is fascinating to realize that your eyes do not actually see. Your eyes simply catch photons of light. They send that raw data back to the occipital lobe, and it is this lobe that constructs the image. It detects edges, colors, and motion. If you were to damage this part of the brain, your eyes could be perfectly healthy, yet you would be completely blind. Sight happens here, in the dark, at the back of your skull. Take a moment to let that geography settle. Frontal for planning, parietal for feeling, temporal for hearing, occipital for seeing. It is a masterful division of labor. But what is truly remarkable is that you never experience these as separate things. You do not feel frontal lobe activity and then parietal lobe activity. You simply experience being. This is the miracle of integration. These lobes are connected by millions of white matter highways association fibers that shuttle data back and forth instantly. Consider the act of drinking a cup of hot tea. Your occipital lobe sees the steam rising and the amber color of the liquid. Your parietal lobe feels the warmth of the ceramic mug against your palm and the weight of it in your hand. Your temporal lobe hears the liquid pouring and remembers that you love the taste of chamomile. Your frontal lobe decides that it is safe to drink, not too hot, and initiates the movement to lift the cup. All of these separate inputs are woven together into a single, seamless moment of drinking tea. The cerebrum takes the fragmented data of the world and unifies it into a coherent story. It creates your reality. And consider this. The cerebrum is also the home of inhibition. We often think of the brain as a machine that does things, but a huge part of its job is to not do things. The frontal lobe is constantly sending quiet no signals. Don't say that rude thing. Don't run away. Don't worry about that sound. As you drift towards sleep, this function becomes very important. Sleep is, in many ways, a process of the cerebrum letting go. The frontal lobe stops planning for tomorrow. The parietal lobe stops checking the position of your limbs. The occipital lobe turns off the lights. The distinct voices of the lobes begin to quiet down, blending into a soft, grey silence. Visualizing those folds and valleys, deep and complex. Imagine the lights in the great office building of the cortex turning off, floor by floor. The executive frontal lobe has gone home for the evening. The busy visual centers have closed their shutters. The map makers in the parietal lobe have rolled up their charts. The thinking brain is resting. But you are still breathing. Your heart is still beating. You are still warm. This is because beneath the sleeping giant of the cerebrum, there are older, deeper structures that never sleep. They are the guardians. They are the ancient parts of the brain that we share with reptiles and birds, the parts that keep the machinery of life running while the mind wanders in dreams. We must descend into the depths. We must go down the elevator, below the cortex, to the very core of the brain. In our next lesson, we will explore these hidden chambers. We will meet the Diencephalon, the Brainstem, and the Cerebellum. We will discover who is watching over you while you sleep. For now, let the grey matter rest. The complex thinking is done. Lesson 7. The Diencephalon, Brainstem, and Cerebellum. Welcome back. In our last session, we walked the halls of the executive suite. We explored the cerebrum, that wrinkled, grey, outer layer of the brain, where your personality, your memories, and your conscious thoughts reside. We spoke of planning, of seeing, of feeling, and of the unique spark that makes you you. But the cerebrum, for all its brilliance, is a bit like a king who sits on a throne. A king cannot rule alone. He needs advisors to filter the news. He needs generals to guard the gates. And most importantly, he needs a foundation to sit upon. Tonight, we are going to leave the bright lights of the conscious mind. We are going to take an elevator down, descending deep below the cortex, into the very core of the skull. We are traveling back in time, evolutionarily speaking. We are going to visit the ancient city that lies buried beneath the modern metropolis. Here, in the shadows, we find the structures that keep you alive. These are the parts of the brain that never sleep, even when you do. They function with a silent, rhythmic precision, managing the intricate machinery of your body so that you are free to think, to dream, or to rest. We are going to explore 3 distinct regions tonight: the central hub, known as the diencephalon, the vital stalk known as the brainstem, and the elegant coordinator known as the cerebellum. These names might sound strange and foreign, like places on an old map, but I assure you, they are as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. In fact, they are your heartbeat. So, settle in. Let your breathing slow down to match the pace of my voice. We are going down to the engine room. Our first stop on this descent is a region completely hidden from the outside. If you could gently pull apart the two hemispheres of the cerebrum, right in the geometric center of the brain, you would find the diencephalon. This is the connection point. It is the interface between the nervous system and the endocrine, hormone system. It consists of three parts, but we will focus on the two most critical rulers, the thalamus and the hypothalamus. Imagine the thalamus as a pair of egg-shaped structures sitting side by side. The word thalamus means inner chamber. I want you to think of the thalamus as the grand central station of your brain. It is the great relay center. Every sensation you feel, with the sole exception of smell, must pass through the thalamus before it reaches your conscious mind. It receives the signals from your eyes, your ears, your skin, and your tongue. But it does not just pass them on blindly, it acts as a gatekeeper. It filters the information. Consider this. Until I mention it, you are likely unaware of the feeling of the shirt on your back, or the slight pressure of your watch, or the hum of the refrigerator. Your sensory nerves are sending that data, but your thalamus is saying, "No, the CEO is busy. That is not important right now." It suppresses the noise so you can focus. It is a brilliant editor. Sitting just below this station is a tiny structure, roughly the size of an almond. This is the hypothalamus. Hypo simply means below. Do not let its size fool you. This almond-sized cluster of neurons is arguably the most powerful square inch in the human body. It is the master of homeostasis. It is responsible for keeping your internal world stable. The hypothalamus controls your hunger. It controls your thirst. It regulates your body temperature, acting as your internal thermostat. If you are hot, it tells you to sweat. If you are cold, it tells you to shiver. It controls your sex drive, your rage, and your pleasure. And, most relevant to us right now, it controls your circadian rhythms. The hypothalamus receives light signals from your eyes to know when it is day and when it is night. It is the clock on the wall. When the sun goes down, it signals for the release of melatonin, guiding you gently towards sleep. Now, let us move downward. The diencephalon sits on top of a sturdy stalk of tissue that connects the brain to the spinal cord. This stalk is the brainstem. If the cerebrum is the human brain, the brainstem is often called the reptilian brain. It is ancient. It handles the raw mechanics of survival. It is divided into three sections, stacked like building blocks. At the top is the midbrain. This connects to the vision and hearing systems. It controls reflexes. If a loud book drops and you jump, that is your midbrain acting before you have even realized what happened. In the middle is the pons. This word means bridge. It bulges out slightly. The pons helps regulate the rhythm of your breathing, ensuring it is smooth and consistent. It is also a major highway for data traveling to the cerebellum. At the bottom, merging seamlessly into the spinal cord, is the medulla oblongata. This is the most vital inch of tissue you possess. The medulla houses the control centers for your heart rate, your blood pressure, and your swallowing reflex. It also controls the basic drive to breathe. You can be asleep, in a coma, or deep in anesthesia, and the medulla will keep the bellows of your lungs pumping. Finally, tucked behind the brainstem, nestled under the back of the cerebrum, is a beautiful structure called the cerebellum. The name literally means little brain, and it looks like one. It is highly folded, just like the cerebrum, but the folds are much tighter and finer, looking almost like the leaves of a fern. The cerebellum is the conductor of the orchestra. It does not decide what to do, it decides how to do it. If your frontal lobe says, "I want to pick up that glass," the cerebellum calculates the distance, the weight, and the speed. It coordinates the dozens of muscles in your arm and hand to move smoothly and precisely. Without the cerebellum, your movements would be jerky and clumsy. It is the master of balance and posture. It is the reason you can stand upright without falling over. And it is the home of muscle memory. Let us pause and reflect on the relationship between these parts. There is a hierarchy here, but it is a partnership. The thalamus is the secretary. The hypothalamus is the facility manager. The brainstem is the power plant. The cerebellum is the navigator. One concept that makes the brainstem particularly fascinating is something called the decussation of pyramids. It is a dramatic name for a simple crossover. In the medulla oblongata, the nerve fibers carrying motor commands from the brain cross over to the other side. The left brain sends wires to the right side of the body, and the right brain sends wires to the left. This crossover happens right here in the stem. It is why a stroke on the right side of the brain affects the left arm. But there is another system running through this region that deserves our attention, especially as we seek rest. It is a net-like collection of neurons running through the core of the brainstem called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS is the volume knob of your consciousness. It sends a constant stream of impulses up to the cerebrum to keep it awake and alert. When your alarm clock goes off in the morning, the sound triggers the RAS, which shouts, "Wake up," to the cortex. Conversely, when you try to sleep, the RAS must be inhibited. It must turn the volume down. It stops bombarding the cortex with noise. It allows the gate of the thalamus to close a little tighter. Some of us have a very sensitive RAS. We wake up at the slightest creak of the floorboards. Others have a RAS that can filter out a thunderstorm. But for all of us, the journey to sleep is essentially the quieting of this system. And then there is the emotional connection. The hypothalamus is the heart of the limbic system, the emotional brain. This explains the physical reality of emotion. Think about it. Emotion is a feeling, a thought. But why does fear make your heart race? Why does embarrassment make your face flush red? Why does anxiety make your stomach churn? It is because the hypothalamus translates the emotion into physiology. The thought, in the cortex, triggers the hypothalamus, which then sends orders down the brainstem to the heart, the blood vessels, and the gut. It turns the ghost of a thought into the reality of a physical sensation. It is the bridge between the mind and the body. So, why does knowing this help you rest? It helps because it allows you to trust your body. We often feel we need to be in control of everything. We worry that if we stop paying attention, the world will fall apart. But look at the machinery we have just described. You do not need to remember to breathe. The medulla has that covered. It has been breathing for you since the moment you were born, and it will not stop tonight. You do not need to command your heart to beat. The brainstem is sending the signal right now, perfectly rhythmic, perfectly strong. You do not need to worry about your body temperature. The hypothalamus is constantly monitoring your blood, adjusting your pores and your metabolism to keep you at a perfect 37 degrees Celsius. You do not need to worry about falling out of bed. Your cerebellum is maintaining a subtle tone in your muscles, keeping you secure. You are supported by a biological autopilot that is millions of years old. These structures are resilient, they are robust, they function best when you get out of their way. When you learn a physical skill like riding a bike or typing on a keyboard, you are training the cerebellum. At first, you have to think about every movement, that is the cerebrum working hard, but eventually, the knowledge is transferred down to the cerebellum. It becomes automatic. You can just do it. Sleep is similar. Your body knows how to sleep. The hypothalamus knows the sun has set. The RAS knows it is time to dim the lights. You don't have to do sleep. You just have to let the cerebrum step back and allow the older, wiser parts of your brain to take the helm. Take a moment to feel that shift. The human brain upstairs is dimming the lights, handing over the keys to the reptilian brain downstairs. The shift change is happening. The thalamus is closing the gates to the outside world. The sounds of the room are drifting further away. The sensation of the blankets is fading into a general warmth. The hypothalamus is slowing the engines. The brainstem is steadying the breath. In, out, in, out. There is a comfort in knowing these systems are always on guard. You are safe to let go. From the base of this brainstem, a thick, white cable descends. It leaves the safety of the skull and enters the channel of the spine. It is the great highway that carries these orders to the rest of the body. We have explored the castle. Now, we must travel the King's Road. In our next lesson, we will follow the spinal cord. We will look at the protective armor of the vertebrae and the 31 pairs of nerves that branch out to reach every inch of your skin. For now, rest in the center, rest in the core. The engine is running smooth and quiet. Lesson 8. The spinal cord and spinal nerves. Welcome back. We have spent the last few sessions exploring the crowded, complex cities of the brain. We have walked the wrinkled valleys of the cerebrum, where thoughts are born. We have descended into the ancient basements of the brainstem, where the rhythms of life are kept. We have seen the centers of command, the seats of power, and the halls of memory. But a king who sits in a castle is powerless if his decrees cannot leave the throne room. A decision made in the frontal lobe to wiggle your toes is nothing but a ghost of an electrical impulse unless there is a path for that signal to travel. It needs a road. It needs a secure, high-speed highway that connects the tower of the mind to the furthest reaches of the physical body. Tonight, we travel that road. We are leaving the protective vault of the skull. We are moving down, passing through the great opening at the base of the head known as the foramen magnum. Here, the brainstem narrows and seamlessly becomes the spinal cord. This is the lifeline. It is the central cable of your existence. If the brain is the computer, the spinal cord is the main interface cable that plugs it into the world. It is a structure of duality, delicate yet armored, simple in shape yet complex in function. It carries the whisper of a feather on your ankle up to your mind, and it carries the thunder of a command to run down to your legs. So, let your back relax against the mattress. Visualize your own spine, that strong, flexible pillar that holds you up all day. Tonight, we look inside the bone. We look at the river of white and grey matter that flows within. We are going to trace the path of the spinal cord and the spinal nerves. Let us begin with the architecture. The spinal cord is a glistening white cylinder of nervous tissue. It is not as thick as you might imagine, only about the width of your thumb or your little finger, but it is vital. It runs from the base of your brain down to the small of your back, ending just below the rib cage, in a structure called the conus medullaris, or the medullary cone. Because this cable is so precious, nature has built a fortress around it. It is encased in the vertebral column. These are the bones of your spine, stacked rings of bone, separated by cushioned discs, creating a flexible but incredibly strong tunnel. This tunnel is the neural canal. Inside this bony tunnel, the cord is wrapped in 3 protective blankets called the meninges. The outer layer is tough and leathery, the dura mater. The middle layer is web-like, the arachnoid mater. And the inner layer is delicate and hugs the cord tight, the pia mater. Between these layers flows the cerebrospinal fluid, the same shock-absorbing liquid that bathes the brain. So, the spinal cord is floating, cushioned, and armored. Now, imagine we take a slice of this cord, cutting it across horizontally, so we can see the inside. What we see is beautiful and symmetrical. In the very center of the white circle, there is a shape made of gray matter. It looks exactly like a butterfly, or perhaps the letter H. This gray matter is the processing center. Just like in the brain, gray matter means cell bodies. It means decisions are being made here. The wings of the butterfly are divided into regions. The back wings are the posterior horns. The front wings are the anterior horns. This geography is crucial. The back of the cord, posterior, deals with sensation. It receives information coming in from the body. The front of the cord, anterior, deals with motor commands. It sends orders out to the muscles. Surrounding this grey butterfly is the white matter. These are the tracks. They are bundles of myelinated axons running up and down the elevator shaft. We call them tracts. Some are ascending tracts, carrying sensory data up to the brain. Hot, sharp, soft. Some are descending tracts, carrying motor data down from the brain. Walk, grab, release. So, the spinal cord is two things at once. It is a highway for long-distance travel, the white matter, and it is a local processing center for immediate decisions, the gray matter. But the cord does not just stay in the center. At every level of the spine, between every pair of vertebrae, it sends out branches. These are the spinal nerves. There are 31 pairs of them. 8 inches the neck, cervical, 12 inches the chest, thoracic, 5 inches the lower back, lumbar, 5 inches the sacrum, and 1 at the tailbone, cochigeal. These nerves are the exit ramps and the on-ramps of the highway. They exit through the gaps in the bones and race out to the body. The nerves from your neck go to your arms and hands. The nerves from your chest wrap around your ribs. The nerves from your lower back lengthen and travel all the way down to your feet. Let us look closer at how these nerves connect. This is one of the most elegant designs in human anatomy. Each spinal nerve attaches to the cord by 2 roots. Imagine a river that splits into 2 streams before joining a lake. The stream at the back is the dorsal root. This is the sensory road. If you touch a hot cup of tea, the signal travels up your arm, into the spinal nerve, and enters the cord through this back door. Interestingly, the cell bodies of these sensory neurons are not inside the cord. They are clustered in a little swelling on the root, called the dorsal root ganglion. It is a little checkpoint just outside the gates. The stream at the front is the ventral root. This is the motor road. The command to pull your hand away leaves the grey matter of the anterior horn and exits through this front door. Just outside the spinal column, these 2 roots, sensory and motor, fuse together to form the single spinal nerve. This means that almost all the nerves in your body are mixed nerves. They are two-way streets. They have lanes for traffic going north and lanes for traffic going south, all wrapped in the same cable. But the spinal cord is not just a passive wire. It has a mind of its own. We call this the reflex arc. This is vital for your survival. Think about what happens when you accidentally touch a hot stove. Do you think about it? Do you say to yourself, "My, that feels warm. I should probably move my hand before I sustain a burn"? No. You pull your hand away instantly. You move before you even feel the pain. How is this possible? It is possible because the spinal cord made the decision for you. Here is the sequence. Receptor. The heat sensors in your finger scream danger. Sensory neuron. The signal races up the arm to the spinal cord. Integration center. Instead of sending the signal all the way up to the brain and waiting for a response, the signal takes a shortcut. It jumps directly to a motor neuron in the grey matter of the cord. Motor neuron. The spinal cord fires a command immediately out the front door. Effector. Your biceps muscle contracts, yanking your hand away. The brain finds out about it a split second later. Ouch! You think after your hand is already safe. The spinal cord acts as a rapid response guardian. It handles the emergencies, so the brain doesn't have to clutter its executive function with survival reflexes. We also see this intelligence in the plexuses. In the neck and the lower back, the spinal nerves do not just go straight out, they weave together. They braid themselves into complex networks called plexuses. The brachial plexus in your shoulder is a famous one. Nerves from several different spinal levels mix and merge to form the nerves of your arm, the radial, the ulnar, the median. This redundancy is a safety feature. If you damage one spinal segment, you do not necessarily lose all function in the arm, because the other segments can still get the signal through. It is a biological failsafe. Why does understanding this highway and the butterfly help us tonight? It grounds us in the physical structure of our own safety. We often feel that our mind is floating somewhere above our head, disconnected. But the spinal cord reminds us that we are deeply, physically integrated. Consider the concept of a dermatome. This is a map of the skin. Every strip of skin on your body corresponds to a specific spinal nerve. The skin of your collarbone communicates with the fourth cervical nerve. The skin of your thumb communicates with the sixth cervical nerve. The skin of your belly button communicates with the 10th thoracic nerve. Shutterstock. When you lie in bed and feel the sheets against your feet, you are activating the sacral nerves. When you feel the pillow against your neck, you are activating the cervical nerves. Your entire surface is mapped, monitored, and connected to the core. It also gives us a new appreciation for posture. We are told to stand up straight, but we rarely ask why. It is to protect the tunnel. When your spine is aligned, ears over shoulders, shoulders over hips, the vertebrae stack perfectly. The neural canal is wide and open. The highway is clear. The nerves can exit their windows without being pinched or compressed. Good posture is not just about looking confident. It is about respecting the flow of information. It is about keeping the lines of communication open. And finally, the spinal cord is the bridge between intention and action. It is the translator. Your brain speaks in abstract thoughts. I want to go there. The spinal cord translates that abstract desire into the specific language of muscle contraction, coordination, and force. It turns the dream into the deed. Take a moment to visualize that white column of light running down your back, protected by bone, cushioned by fluid, glowing with the traffic of a million signals. Most of the traffic we have discussed so far has been about the things you feel and the muscles you move, the voluntary things, the things you control. But there is another set of wires running alongside these. There is a shadow network. What about the things you don't control? What nerve tells the heart to speed up when you are frightened? What nerve tells the stomach to churn when you smell dinner? What nerve tells the pupil of your eye to shrink in the sunlight? These commands do not go to the skeletal muscles. They go to the organs. They go to the inner life of the body. This is a special, secret division of the nervous system. It works in the background, keeping the balance, managing the energy, and saving your life without you ever lifting a finger. We are leaving the voluntary world behind. In our next lesson, we will explore the autonomic nervous system. We will meet the two great forces that battle for control of your inner state, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. For now, let your spine relax. Let the vertebrae settle. The highway is open, and the traffic is flowing smooth and slow. Lesson 9. The Autonomic Nervous System. Welcome back. We are nearing the end of our journey together. We have traveled a great distance, from the microscopic sparks of the single neuron to the grand architecture of the brain and the long, winding highway of the spinal cord. We have mapped the territories of thought and sensation. We have seen how you move your hand, how you feel the world, and how you decide to act. But if you think about your day-to-day existence, you will realize that the vast majority of what happens inside your body is not a decision. You do not wake up in the morning and decide to dilate your pupils to let in the light. You do not sit down to a meal and consciously command your stomach to secrete acid or your intestines to ripple. You do not tell your heart to speed up when you run for a bus, and you certainly do not tell it to slow down when you lie down to sleep. There is a silent intelligence operating beneath the surface of your will. It is the automatic pilot of the human vessel. It is a system that works tirelessly, minute by minute, adjusting the delicate chemistry of your survival without ever asking for your opinion. Tonight, we explore this hidden kingdom. We are going to study the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS. This is the part of you that keeps the lights on. It manages the energy. It balances the budget of the body. And, most importantly for us tonight, it is the system that allows you to shift from the noise of the day into the silence of sleep. It is the master of the off switch. So, let your shoulders drop, unclench your jaw. As we talk about these systems of relaxation, you might find your body naturally following along. That is the power of the autonomic nervous system. It listens. Let us define our terms. The nervous system is broadly divided into the somatic and the autonomic. The somatic system, which we discussed earlier, connects to your skeletal muscles. It is the system of voluntary control. It is you lifting a cup or turning a page. The autonomic system connects to everything else. It connects to the cardiac muscle of the heart, the smooth muscle of the blood vessels and organs, and the glands that secrete hormones and fluids. It is the system of involuntary control. To understand the ANS, you must understand that life is a balancing act. The body is constantly caught between two opposing needs. Sometimes, you need to spend energy to survive, to run, to fight, to work. Other times, you need to conserve energy to survive, to heal, to digest, to grow. Because of this dual nature, the autonomic nervous system is split into two distinct divisions. They are like siblings with opposite personalities, or like the gas pedal and the brake in a car. They are the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic division. Let us meet the first sibling, the sympathetic division. You may know this as the fight or flight system. This is the alarm system. Its job is to prepare the body for intense physical activity or emergency. When the sympathetic division takes charge, it mobilizes your resources. It screams, "Action!" Now, meet the second sibling, the parasympathetic division. You may know this as the rest and digest system. This is the maintenance crew. Its job is to calm the body down, to conserve energy, and to manage the housekeeping tasks like digestion and waste removal. When the parasympathetic division takes charge, it whispers, "Peace, Shutterstock." Most organs in your body receive wires from both of these divisions. This is called dual innervation. Picture your heart. It has a sympathetic nerve attached to it that says, "Faster." It also has a parasympathetic nerve attached to it that says, "Slower." The actual heart rate you experience is the result of these two voices negotiating. It is a constant, dynamic balance. It is never fully on or fully off. It is a sliding scale of autonomic tone. Right now, as you lie in bed, the parasympathetic voice is getting louder, and the sympathetic voice is fading into a whisper. Let us look deeper at the machinery of these two systems, because the way they are built tells us a lot about how they function. The sympathetic division is built for speed and widespread activation. Its nerves originate from the middle of the spinal cord, the thoracic and lumbar regions. We often call it the thoracolumbar outflow. When the alarm sounds, the sympathetic system does not send a polite letter. It sends a broadcast. It triggers a chain reaction. The nerves fire, and they also stimulate the adrenal glands to release adrenaline, epinephrine, and norepinephrine into the bloodstream. Think about what happens when you are startled. Your pupils dilate instantly to let in more light, so you can see the danger. Your airways dilate to let in more oxygen. Your heart rate skyrockets to pump blood to the muscles. But here is the clever part. Your digestion stops. The blood vessels feeding your stomach and intestines constrict. The body says, "We do not have time to digest that apple right now. We are trying to survive." The blood is shunted away from the core and out to the arms and legs. You become a machine built for running. This is a mass activation. It affects the whole body at once. Now, contrast that with the parasympathetic division. This system is built for precision and locality. Its nerves originate from the very top and the very bottom of the central nervous system, the brainstem and the sacrum. We call it the craniosacral outflow. The star of this show, and a name you should cherish, is the vagus nerve. Vagus means wanderer in Latin. It is the 10th cranial nerve. It wanders from the brainstem, down the neck, through the chest, and into the abdomen. It wraps its tendrils around the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the liver, and the intestines. It carries nearly 80% of the total parasympathetic traffic. When the parasympathetic system is active, the effects are the exact opposite of the alarm state. Your pupils constrict. You don't need to see far distances. Your heart rate slows down. The vagus nerve releases acetylcholine onto the pacemaker cells of the heart, telling them to take it easy. Your airways constrict slightly. You don't need massive amounts of air. And crucially, the blood returns to the core. The vessels in the digestive tract open up. The stomach begins to churn. The glands secrete saliva and enzymes. The body says, "The danger is past. It is time to refuel. It is time to heal." This is why you often feel tired after a large meal. The blood has left your brain and muscles to focus on the work of the gut. It is a state of vulnerability, but it is also the only state in which true recovery can happen. Why is this lesson so vital for you, right here, right now? Because modern life often traps us in the sympathetic state. The tigers of the modern world are not physical predators. They are emails, deadlines, traffic jams, and screens. These stressors trigger the same ancient alarm system. Your heart rate rises, your digestion pauses, and your body prepares for a fight that never comes. If you stay in that state, if the gas pedal is stuck down, you cannot sleep, you cannot digest, you cannot repair your tissues. This is the root of so much illness. But here is the secret. You can hack the system. You can consciously engage the parasympathetic brake. The bridge between the voluntary and the involuntary is your breath. Remember the vagus nerve? It passes right through the diaphragm. When you take a slow, deep breath, and especially when you extend the exhale, you are physically stimulating the vagus nerve. You are sending a reverse signal from the body to the brain. You are telling the hypothalamus, "We are breathing slowly, therefore we must be safe." Let's try it for a moment. Just notice your breath. If you breathe short and shallow into your chest, you mimic the panic response. But if you let your belly rise and then let the air out slowly, you are flipping the switch. You are activating the acetylcholine. You are manually lowering your heart rate. This is the physiology of relaxation. It is not just a mood. It is a mechanical shift in the nervous system. When you lay your head on the pillow, you are waiting for the rest and digest system to take full control. You might hear your stomach gurgle. That is a wonderful sound. It means the sympathetic guard dog has gone to sleep and the parasympathetic housekeepers have begun their work. They are processing the nutrients that will build your cells for tomorrow. There is also a profound beauty in the concept of autonomic tone. It reminds us that balance is not a static state. It is a gentle oscillation. Your heart rate speeds up slightly when you inhale and slows down when you exhale. This is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it is a sign of a healthy heart and a flexible nervous system. Even in stillness, there is a rhythm. Let that rhythm take over now. The oscillation of the breath, the slow tide of the vagus nerve washing over the organs, the heart slowing down, the stomach settling. You have learned about the two siblings, the protector who fights and the nurturer who heals. Tonight, the protector can stand down. The gates are locked. The world is distant. You are in the safe hands of the parasympathetic system. We have now covered every major component of the nervous system. We know the cells. We know the signals. We know the brain, the spine, and the nerves. We know the automatic controls. But a human being is not just a list of parts. A symphony is not just a pile of instruments. The magic lies in how it all comes together. How does a beam of light hitting your eye become the memory of a summer day? How does a thought become a movement? We have one final lesson remaining. In our next and last session, we will put the puzzle together. We will look at sensory and motor integration. We will close the loop. For now, just breathe. Slow and deep. Let the vagus nerve do its work. Rest. Lesson 10. Sensory and motor integration. Welcome to our final session. It has been a long and quiet journey, hasn't it? We have traveled together through the hidden landscapes of your own body. We started with a map of the territories. We held the tiny, branching neurons in our hands. We watched the sparks of electricity race down the axons, and we saw the chemical boats drift across the synaptic rivers. We explored the great cathedral of the brain, the fortress of the spine, and the silent, automatic wisdom of the inner organs. We have taken the machine apart, piece by piece, to understand how it is built. But a pile of gears is not a watch, and a list of cells is not a human being. The true miracle of the nervous system is not in the parts, but in the partnership. It is in the way these billions of separate entities sing together in a single, unified chorus. Tonight, we are going to put the puzzle together. We are going to stand back and look at the whole picture. We are going to study sensory and motor integration. This is the story of how you experience reality. It is the story of the loop, the seamless cycle of sensing, thinking, and doing. It is the answer to the question, how does a beam of sunlight hitting my eye become the memory of a summer day? Or how does the thought of water become the movement of my hand reaching for a glass? So, for this last time, let your body sink into the support beneath you. Let the heavy concepts of the previous lessons fade away. You do not need to memorize anything tonight. You simply need to witness the symphony of your own existence. The work is done. The system is functioning. Let us watch it flow. To understand integration, we must view life as a continuous cycle of 3 events. It is a loop that repeats over and over from the moment you are born until the moment you leave this world. Those 3 events are sensation, integration, and motor output. Let us walk through this cycle with a simple, concrete example. Imagine you are walking barefoot on a beach, and you step on a patch of warm, soft sand. The cycle begins with sensation. Embedded in the skin of your foot are tiny biological machines called receptors. These are the transducers. Their job is to translate the physical world into the language of the nervous system. You have thermoreceptors that detect the heat of the sand. You have mechanoreceptors that detect the pressure and the texture. When your foot touches the sand, these receptors vibrate. They change shape. This physical change triggers the opening of ion channels. Remember those gates we studied? Sodium rushes in. A spark is born. The physical warmth of the sun has just been transmuted into an electrical code. Now, the signal begins its journey. It travels up the sensory nerves of your leg. It is an afferent signal, moving toward the center. It enters the spinal cord through the back door, the dorsal root, and begins to ascend. It climbs the white columns of the spinal cord, rushing up toward the brain like a message in a pneumatic tube. This leads us to the second phase, integration. The signal arrives at the brain, but it does not go straight to the CEO. First, it stops at the thalamus. As we learned, this is the gateway. The thalamus recognizes the signal as touch and warmth and forwards it to the correct address in the cerebral cortex. Specifically, it sends the mail to the parietal lobe, to the primary somatosensory cortex. Suddenly, neurons in that specific part of your brain start to fire. Now, you feel it. Before this moment, it was just electricity. Now, it is a sensation. Warmth. Softness. But the brain is not satisfied with just raw data. It needs context. So, the signal moves to the association areas. It talks to your memory in the temporal lobe. Have we felt this before? Yes, this feels like the beach. It talks to the limbic system. Do we like this? Yes, it feels relaxing. This is integration. It is the process of taking a simple input and weaving it into the tapestry of your consciousness. You are not just feeling warmth. You are experiencing the joy of a holiday. And finally, the cycle completes with motor output. Your brain decides to stay there. The frontal lobe, the planner, makes a decision. Let's dig our toes in. This command travels to the motor cortex. The neurons there fire a new signal. It travels down from the brain, down the spinal cord, out the front door, the ventral root, and races down the leg. It reaches the muscles of your foot. It releases acetylcholine. The muscles contract. Your toes wiggle into the sand. Sensation. Integration. Output. The loop is closed. And as you wiggle your toes, new sensations arise, and the cycle begins again. Now, reflect on the complexity of what we just described. We slowed it down to explain it, but in reality, that entire loop happened in a fraction of a second. And it is not just one loop. It is millions of parallel loops happening simultaneously. While you are feeling the sand, your eyes are seeing the blue of the water, occipital integration. Your ears are hearing the crash of the waves, temporal integration. Your cerebellum is adjusting your posture so you don't fall over on the shifting surface, unconscious motor integration. Your hypothalamus is monitoring the heat and telling your sweat glands to open, autonomic integration. All of these distinct instruments are playing at once, yet you do not hear a chaotic noise. You hear a symphony. You experience a unified moment of being at the beach. This is the binding problem, one of the greatest mysteries of neuroscience. How does the brain bind all these separate electrical signals into a single, coherent reality? We do not fully know the answer, but we know it relies on the massive interconnectivity of the white matter. Those billions of axons we discussed are constantly cross-referencing. The visual brain talks to the auditory brain. The emotional brain talks to the logical brain. It is a continuous, high-speed conference call that never ends. Let us also look at the difference between a reflex and a conscious action, because this illustrates the layers of integration. If you stepped on a sharp piece of glass instead of soft sand, the integration would happen much lower down. The signal would hit the spinal cord, and the spinal cord would scream, "Pull back!" immediately. The motor output would be fired before the signal even reached the brain. You would be hopping on one foot before you even realized you were hurt. This shows the wisdom of the hierarchy. The spinal cord handles the urgent safety integration. The brainstem handles the automatic life support integration. And the cortex handles the complex, meaningful, voluntary integration. It is a system built on delegation. The CEO, your conscious mind, is only bothered with the most interesting or novel information. The rest is handled by the staff. This is why sleep is so restorative. When you sleep, you are essentially closing the sensation and motor output departments. You close the eyes, no visual input. You lie still, no motor output. This leaves the integration department, the brain, free to work on its own internal projects. It organizes memories. It flushes out toxins. It repairs the pathways. By stopping the loop of external interaction, you allow the internal integration to heal the machine. So, here we are at the end of the course. Why does this matter? Why have we spent 10 hours studying this biology? Because you are this system. We often talk about my brain or my nerves as if they are possessions, like a car or a coat. But they are not possessions. They are the possessor. Your ability to understand the words I am speaking right now is a feat of auditory integration in your Wernicke's area. Your ability to visualize the images we have discussed is a feat of your visual association cortex. Your feeling of relaxation, the heaviness in your limbs, is the result of your parasympathetic nervous system slowing your heart and your reticular activating system turning down the volume of your awareness. Understanding this anatomy gives you permission to be kind to yourself. When you feel overwhelmed, you know it is just your sympathetic system doing its job a little too well. When you struggle to learn a new skill, you know it is just your cerebellum needing more repetition to lay down the myelin tracks. When you are tired, you know it is your adenosine levels rising, begging you to clear the synapse. It takes the mystery out of the mechanism, but it leaves the wonder. In fact, it increases the wonder. To know that you are made of stardust and salt water, organized into a web of electricity that can think and love and dream, that is the greatest story there is. Take a moment to let that idea find its place. The loop is slowing down now. Sensation is fading. The room is dark. The sounds are soft. The inputs are stopping. Motor output is ceasing. Your hands are still. Your legs are heavy. The muscles are silent. All that is left is integration. The quiet hum of the mind resting within itself. We have built the map. We have met the cells. We have traced the wires. We have seen the sparks. We have felt the chemistry. We have walked the brain. We have descended the spine. We have balanced the breath. And now we have closed the circle. The course is complete. You have learned the architecture of your own peace. There is nothing left to study tonight. There is nothing left to understand. The nervous system knows exactly what to do. It has been waiting for this moment to take care of you. Trust the design. Trust the silence. Good night and sleep well.